Hi everyone, welcome. We'll just wait on a few more people coming and joining in. Alrighty, it's 12 o'clock, so we can get started. Welcome everyone to our webinar series day 4. The series so far has been fantastic, and I'm super excited to what we have today. I'm Nat, I'm the Sustainability Manager at Reclaim, and I will be your host for today. So a few housekeeping rules. This webinar is being recorded, and all attendees will receive a copy of the recording later on today. Every attendee is on listen only mode, which means your camera and your mic are off. You can't turn them on. But we still want you guys to engage as much as possible. So please make the most of our react buttons where you can show your engagement to the speakers, as well as our Q&A section. So please focus on putting your questions through the Q&A. We do have people moderating that forum, so there might be questions immediately through the forum, or we'll answer it live. So today's focus, as we've been going down the waste minimization hierarchy throughout the week, we're finally at recycling for Recycling Week. So today's focus is to ensure that all recyclables actually get to be recycled because they're adequately cleaned. So contamination is essentially any material that is in the wrong stream. So leaving a little bit of milk in your milk bottle means that that milk shouldn't be in a recycling stream and instead should be in a food waste stream. So to help illustrate that recycling point, we are joined by MFE, and Reclaim. So we have Stephanie and Harry presenting for MFE and Johnny. I will let them introduce themselves and what they're covering. So I'll hand it over to you, Steph.
Thanks, Nat, just bringing those slides up now. Thank you for that introduction, and kia ora koutou. Thank you for coming along to the session today. I can see quite a few people online already, and no doubt more joining. I hope everyone is having a great recycling week so far. My name is Stephanie Hill. I'm a principal advisor working in waste and resource efficiency at the Ministry for the Environment. And as Nat mentioned, I'm joined today by my colleague Harry as well, and we're going to provide an update on the things that we have implemented or underway to improve in recycling for New Zealanders. And as many of you have probably noticed, it's a busy area for us at the moment, and there is a lot going on. So we'll do our best to give an overview of all of that. So just to set the scene, first of all, as many of us are aware, there's plenty of room for improvement at the moment. So we do produce and dispose of large quantities of waste, more than many comparable nations overseas. From our most recent statistics, each New Zealander sends around 700 kilograms of waste to landfill every year, including at least 60 kilograms of plastic. And not only are we using and disposing of a lot of plastics and other materials, but we also need to be mindful of the climate impact of our waste habits. The waste sector contributed around 4% of our total greenhouse gas emissions in 2019, as well as around 9% of our biogenic methane emissions. So biogenic methane is a shorter lived but especially powerful greenhouse gas, which is why it receives quite a lot of attention. And not only that, but waste and recycling, I think probably because they're really something that's very tangible for people. It's something that we really care about, and for many of us, it's really important and is a big concern for many of us. So things like the build-up of plastic in our environment feature consistently amongst the top 10 concerns for New Zealanders, even alongside things like the cost of living. So this is something that many of us care about, and we certainly hear that many of us are keen to be doing better and improving. where we currently are. Some of you, in terms of that improvement, some of you may be familiar with our New Zealand waste strategy, which was adopted earlier this year. What it does is set out a vision for the future that hopefully we can all get behind. And I'm sure that many of you on the webinar today are also helping to contribute to that already. The waste strategy talks about having a low emissions, low waste society built upon a circular economy for what we see as the future that we want to be working towards. And I wanted to share some examples of what that might look like. So it could look like things like day-to-day products that we use designed for refilling and reuse, or readily recycled if it's not possible to have that refilling and reuse. Systems that make it really easy for all of us to play our part. So things like really good design so that we've got recycled content, we don't have harmful products within the materials that we're using. It's really easy to participate, so it's easy to, for example, return goods at the end of life, recycling systems that work really well for businesses and households. And solutions also that replace the need for so much stuff in the first place. So are there ways that we could share things together? Are there services that can be sold instead of products, or that sort of thing? And another really important point, organic materials could be used to enrich our natural and farming systems rather than, as at present, generating emissions through their disposal in landfill. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of some of the components of our work program that will help us move towards this future vision. I will shortly hand over to my colleague Harry, who's going to talk about those first few topics there in a bit more detail. So what we're doing to make recycling easier for households, phasing out problem plastics, and also our plastics action plan. We don't have time to talk about it all today, but I did just want to briefly mention some of the other components of our overall work program as well, which includes an action and investment plan that will help put the strategy into action. We've got work underway on new waste legislation, product stewardship for many products, including plastic packaging, partnerships to work with businesses and households in Maori to reduce food waste, implementing quite a wide range of actions in our emissions reduction plan, including work on food waste, construction and demolition, and other areas. We've got a lot of work happening on funding and investment, improving waste data and compliance and enforcement, as well as work on contaminated land, biotechnology, multilateral environmental agreements, and more. But with that brief introduction, I will now hand over to Harry, who will get into a bit more of the detail for you.
Thanks, Steph. Kia ora koutou, Harry Livesey. I also work at the Ministry of the Environment, working on waste. Today, I'm just going to run you through a bunch of the changes that are coming or that are on the Ministry for the Environment's work program. Next slide, please, Steph. So as recycling services for households have become more and more prevalent, it's become increasingly clear that differing rules all around the country are creating confusion in households about what is it that you should put in the recycling bin. But it's also confusing for brands and manufacturers about what packaging they ought to choose and how they label that packaging. So at the moment, with different rules around the country, you can't put an accurate recycling label on packaging because it will be recyclable in some parts of the country, but not in others. So that's one of the key drivers behind the standardisation of materials. From the 1st of February next year, all of the council collections will need to accept the same materials, and that's the glass bottles and jars, paper and cardboard, plastic bottles, trays and containers, 1, 2 and 5, and aluminium and steel cans. We do also want to mention, because it's Rinse and Clean Thursday, that your materials should be nice and clean, and if necessary, rinse them out before you pop them in. One of the things that's on the work program is to develop requirements for all urban areas to have a recycling collection. So there's still a few districts out there where urban areas don't have recycling collections. They are a key part of our system to support a circular economy. So this requirement that we will be talking to a new minister about to see what the priorities are for moving that along. Next slide. We will also be developing a similar requirement around food scraps collections for urban areas. So as Steph mentioned, diverting food scraps from landfill is a really pretty simple step that we can take in order to reduce our methane emissions. And otherwise, there's much more complicated options for reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And is also really key for circulating those nutrients back to the soil again. I'll just touch on two common misconceptions that come up around food scraps. So people often bring up the emissions from trucks carting the food scraps around the place. But the powerful impact of methane that comes from landfill means that you can actually truck food scraps the length of either of our main islands before you start to approach the emissions that you get from landfilling food scraps. And there's all of processing facilities at the moment are much closer than that. So the transport emissions are a little bit of a red herring unless you're really transporting that food a long way or into Ireland in New Zealand. And the other thing is around materials that rot. So you get biodegradable plastics these days. We don't want any of those in landfill, really. So if it rots in landfill, that means it's making methane, and we don't want it there. So in landfill, you'd quite like materials to just stay as they are, stay inert, and essentially they're as safely as we can tucked away. Moving on to the next slide. There are a few moves to get rid of a few materials that are problematic. You can see here that a number of materials are banned, and these are either problematic items that commonly become litter and end up introducing microplastics into our environment, or they disrupt recycling processes, and we have alternatives. The third tranche on the end there, the regulations for that are yet to be drafted. So again, there will be a process of talking to the new minister. Those are being developed. Next slide. Last year, New Zealand published a National Plastics Action Plan. It sets out at a fairly high level New Zealand's actions to move us towards more sustainable use of plastic. You can see the three principles down the bottom there around less plastic, more circular and better for the environment. But it also informs things like New Zealand's position in negotiations on a global plastics treaty, and those negotiations are going on at the moment. And things like the priorities for the Plastics Innovation Fund. Thanks. That was a quick run through. I think, are we going to Johnny now? And then we'll have questions.
Yes, I'll take it on over. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Harry. That was very insightful, especially Harry, that point on the truck movement. I did not know that stat, and I have certainly been asked in the past, is it really that much better to be trucking things along? So thank you for providing me with that. I will just quickly share Johnny's presentation. And then the floor is yours, Johnny.
Oh, thanks, Nat.
Can you see that in presenter mode? Yes.
Yep, can now. Yep, thank you. Hi guys. So I'm Johnny. I'm a key account manager at Reclaim, and I'll run you through a little bit about commercial recycling. So I thought I'd start with kind of the differences between residential and commercial and why there are these differences, and then go through the benefits and the challenges that we see in commercial. So before we start, I thought I'd just put a little bit about Reclaim so you know why I'm here. So Reclaim's been helping companies recycle for nearly 50 years now. So I've been doing it for a while. What we do is we put in place a wide range of recycling streams, and our goal is to help our customers divert as much as possible from landfill. You'll see the streams listed up there that we do direct, and there's also a wide range of subcontracted streams that we can add to those. So Reclaim also has an advisory division that's headed up by Nat, which conducts waste audits and education sessions. Next one, thanks, Nat. So before we get started, I thought I'd just highlight recycling's role in sustainability. So as you can see on the hierarchy there, recycling is actually 4th on the list. It is not the most important. There are steps that you can take to avoid, reduce, and reuse first, which is what we always discuss with our customers before you come to recycling. We're also aware that in a sustainable utopia, I guess, there wouldn't be a need for recycling or reclaim, but I don't think we're quite yet there as a society. So we'll carry on. Next slide. Yes, Nat. Cool. So to start with, commercial versus residential, there are a few differences. The main difference you guys will note is residentially you will have one or now 2 bins with the food waste bin, and you put a lot of your recycling into it. And at work with commercial, you'll be asked to separate out a little bit more. So for example, your paper and your cardboard might be separate bins to your plastics. So with residential, I think it makes sense on that side. There's a wide range of houses across all the cities with small volumes from each house. So sending one truck to each house, collecting the small amounts of volumes, taking it back to a processing facility like Visi and sorting it there seems to make the most sense. Whereas with commercial, you'll find most companies choose for what we call source separation. So we ask our customers to take a bit of time and put all the recycling in different streams, and that means it's a bit easier for us on the back end. So it's important to note that every company does have a different waste profile. So for example, even if you're in the same industry as another company, whether you have compostable or biodegradable coffee cups or reusing them, or whether your company has paper towels or hand dryers in bathrooms, waste profiles differ a lot. So when we put in place systems, they are very specific to the individual company that we're looking at. Thanks, Nat. So onto the benefits. So really important to note what we talk to is company stance plays quite a big role here. So what I mean by company stance is why a company is recycling. Are you recycling because of government legislation? Are your customers asking you to? Are your staff putting pressure on you? Do you have sustainable level targets at board level? Or is it just because it's cheaper than landfill? So we normally like to talk about a bit of a spectrum. On one end, the companies might have the greenest of green ambitions, and doesn't matter what the cost, they're going to want to recycle. And on the other end, it's just someone that wants it taken away. So people generally fall somewhere within that spectrum, and where they fall depends on kind of the solutions we'll put in place and also the benefits that they'll receive. So the first benefit you'll see there is source separation. As I mentioned earlier, we ask our customers to separate. So the best analogy I can give for that is if you imagine using a dishwasher for your knives and forks. If you put all the knives into one compartment, all the forks into another, all the spoons into another one, when it's done and you want to put them away, you can pick them all up at once and put them into the drawers. That's a really simplified version of what we ask our customers to do. We ask them to take a little bit of time on the front end and put the items into separate bins, and that way on the back end it allows us to be a bit more efficient with the sorting and reduce our costs, which in turn we can pass on to our customers. So another benefit of source separation there is reducing cross-contamination. So what we mean by this is, for example, if a bottle of Coke spills onto a piece of paper in a bin or in a truck, it tends to damage that piece of paper's recyclability. So we like to separate out for that reason. Thirdly, there's a wide range of streams. They don't all go to the same place, so often it makes sense to have separate bins anyway. And lastly, because of the large volumes that some commercial companies go through, you're going to have multiple bins anyway, so it makes sense to separate them out, and we'll come pick them up on different schedules. So the second one there that been brought up is value and volume. So when you take an individual piece of cardboard or a plastic bottle, it doesn't really have much value. The value comes once we've collected it, it's been collated, sorted, baled, and it's ready to be processed. So basically getting to this point at the lowest possible cost is the key for us. So we use economies of scale to try and get as much at one time as possible, keep the costs down for ourselves, and then essentially cost down for our customers. And lastly, on this slide, cost allocation. So, depending on where you are in New Zealand, you may have your rates that you pay for your waste and recycling. With commercial companies, can be very specific about the cost that they spend on waste and recycling. You can put in place systems and reduce your bin size, service schedule, along with, as we've spoken about, starting with procurement of buying the right products in the first instance, so you can do as much recycling as possible. So on to the next slide for challenges. The challenges that we come across. First off, we like to talk about responsibility. So we like the companies that we work with to take responsibility for recycling. It's not really something we can do for you. We can help, we can set up systems, infrastructure, training, education, but we're not the ones day in, day out making the decision of what to put where. So that's the first thing that we like to talk to our customers about, is making sure that they understand the responsibility is on them. The second challenge we find is contamination. So even if it's a recyclable product, a glass bottle and a cardboard cage is contamination. What this is, again, it slows down the process on our end. We have to sort it out, and it makes it more expensive for our customers. So Reclaim is quite strict on this. If we find too much contamination, we'll take a photo, send it through to the customer, and ask them to take it out for us, rather than us being the sorting. And we'll find that people normally learn pretty quickly when they're sorting through bins, and helps to not have it happen again. And the next one we have got there is commodity market. So recycling is an interesting industry in that we are at the mercy of the commodity prices of the recyclables. The market does go up and down. It doesn't follow any necessary trends. There's things that have impacts, such as the China ban on imports about 5 or 6 years ago, made the cardboard price fall quite significantly. The Ukraine war more recently, and recessionary times can also have impacts on commodity markets. So us making sure our customers are aware of, one, the fluctuating prices, and when they do change, our ability to let them know about the changes, both up and down. And the last challenge we find is logistics and infrastructure. So unfortunately, recycling and waste isn't front of mind for architects when building buildings, and we don't often get the best waste room size. So putting in place a solution is very customized depending on how much space we have to work with. We've got some pretty big trucks going to some pretty small areas sometimes. So it's best for us to, again, come on site and find the best solutions for that individual site. Last slide. So you'll be familiar with the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff analogy. Tying back into the hierarchy slide we had earlier, we see recycling as this ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. It is for now necessary, but there are definitely steps you can take at the top of the cliff, including the avoid, reduce, and reuse, in order to make less requirement for recycling at the end. And that's it from me. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Johnny. Thank you, both of you, MFE and Johnny, for shedding a little bit more light into recycling. Now, I see there's been some questions popping up, but I actually have a bit of a question of my own, and I know that you both have touched on it. And Johnny, I think your ending is really segue into my question of, it's obvious that recycling is important, but there's other things that people can do and should do first. And personally, for you guys, what is the number one thing that individuals, or the first step that individuals in this call can take to improve their waste footprint? Johnny, you can go first if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll start. I guess it comes down to procurement. So what that means is decision making when you're purchasing. So it's just taking that little bit of time up front. I think maybe looking to purchase items that are recyclable. That will make your life a lot easier on the back end. Like I said, recycling is something that, we look to help out where we can, but if everyone bought something that was easily recyclable, that makes, I think, the biggest difference.
Steph, Harry, do you have anything to add?
I mean, it's very much about take a look at what it is that you are throwing out. What's your big volume items, and is there something there that you can change? And you may find that you can change what it is that you're bringing into your house in order that you can throw away less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Just to further both of those, I guess, even taking a step further back again and considering, what your needs actually are, how you can meet them. Is it through consuming a product, or are there other things you could be doing? And we see that can manifest in many different ways in our life. Maybe with Christmas coming up, you're talking to family and saying, "Hey, this year we want." We want things we can do together, or a zoo pass or something like that. We've got a lot of plastic toys, please don't give us more, or whatever it is. I feel like there's so many different ways in which each of us every day effectively encounter decision steps in which we can end up with more stuff or less stuff, and that's just embedded in day-to-day life. So it is quite challenging to take that step back and that sort of that overview. But it's absolutely something we can all try and think about.
Absolutely. I think normalizes saying no and opting for waste-free alternatives is absolutely the go. There's been a question on, and once again, I had a similar question myself. Is it possible to encourage industries to make their recycling numbers bigger, more readable to prevent contamination?
Yeah, there's two parts to that. I think on plastic items, there's a plastic which is often confused with a recycling number, but it really does just identify what type of plastic it is. So you'll find that on plastics that are not accepted in curbside recycling as well, because it tells people the type of plastic. There is some encouragement and a bit of movement within New Zealand to adopt the Australasian recycling label, which is a much bigger symbol that goes on, and it includes a bit more detail about what you can do with the different parts of the packaging. So it might be, remove the shrink wrap before you recycle it, or it tells you what to do with the lids, which for curbside recycling in New Zealand will now be taken off. And so that is coming through, but again, it's been quite difficult for brands and manufacturers to put accurate labeling on when it hasn't been the same all across the country. So with standardization, that will now be an easier process. However, we are aware that it does take some time for all of the labeling changes to be designed and added to the many, many products that are out there. So it will take a little bit of time to filter through, I think.
Does anyone have anything else to add to that? No. There's been a question come through, and Johnny, I think you might be able to actually cover this and maybe even I feel like I could answer this in the sense that a question being, can the big moving boxes for industries be reused instead of putting it into the recycling, which will save money or cost as well? I wonder why the packages are not being returned to be reused. I think my initial answer is there are moving companies that provide you with crates. So you could opt for something like this, so opt away from those. But is there a way that individuals can access, large scale volume of recycling outside of just your commercial, your residential bin?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess the first point I'd make there is, definitely reuse as much as you can. If you move in house, and you'll find your friends will typically, have a bunch of boxes you can reuse. If you have a lot of large boxes that are not going to fit inside your bin, Reclaim has a free public drop-off in Penrose, so you could come there, put any large items in there. It also does take items such as plastic film, so any shrink wrap type materials, LDP number 4. If you have any of that you want to recycle, feel free to come down to our free public drop-off, and that'll help it recycle again if it's not possible to be reused in the first place.
You'll also find that many councils will have a similar sort of drop-off where you can take some of those larger recyclable items if you can't break it down and fit it in your bin.
And we're also seeing a rise of things like sharing apps. I know there's an app, or possibly more than one, but apps for sharing construction and demolition materials, for sharing excess food, for sharing, maybe things that you only use occasionally, like tools or sporting equipment or that sort of thing. So I think all of those developments are a great way to move into that space as well, of assessing whether you need things and how you can meet your short-term need without necessarily getting a new thing.
Okay, final question. Are there any plans for curbside recycling of soft plastics for residential?
Yeah, not at this stage. It is still being rolled out, so it's not across all of the country with the collections that are run at supermarkets, which is actually run through the manufacturers. And they are still working through a few issues around the best things to do with all of the collected soft plastics and how to pay for its recycling as well. So at the moment, that is an industry funded scheme. As Johnny mentioned, a lot of the household recycling needs to be sorted out at quite mechanical sorting plants, and soft plastics are a real issue for all of the machines there. They just get tangled up in all of the cogs, and then staff have to spend time untangling them and cutting them free. So at the moment, most of our material recycling facilities are not keen to have soft plastics coming through them. There are trials around with some ways that you might get around some of this, but at the moment there are no plans to trial them in curbside recycling.
I think all council regions will actually appreciate your point, Harry, as I have heard in several instances that is one of the main frustrating points of people putting in the soft plastics. So if you are collecting your soft plastics, take it back to store and not put it in your curbside bin should be the answer. We've gone a little bit over time, so I think we'll finish it here in terms of questions, but thank you so much, both Stephanie, Harry and Johnny, for all your wisdom and your participation. And I look forward to seeing all of you guys back in tomorrow for our final webinar, which is for Reflection Friday. See you there. Thank you.